Welcome to today's video on writing to persuade. This is a kind of writing that you get on the examining board that I'm teaching, OCR, and particularly AQA, and I believe also in edXcel. So the skills I'm going to teach you are transferable. The first thing I want to tell you is that most teachers find a very narrow focus. You might have learnt A Forest or Da Forest to learn persuasive writing techniques, but that's really like trying to teach someone to ride a bicycle with stabilizers. Yes, it gets you from A to B and it stops you falling over, but it's not really riding a bicycle. So today I want to teach you how to aim your sights higher. So this is what I teach my students. Faster croc! That's my handy mnemonic for remembering nearly all the persuasive writing techniques. A, alliteration. H, hyperbole, which means over-exaggeration. Notice it's spelt hyperbole, but pronounced hyperbole. F is for facts. A, anecdote, which means a little story that purports to be true, may not be, but a little story nevertheless. S, statistics. T, the rule of three, the pattern of three, triplets, however you've been taught it. E is emotive language. R is repetition. C, contrasting pairs, and I'll explain what that is later using the great Jeremy Clarkson as an example. R, rhetorical question. O for opinion, and C for creating an enemy. So that's where I started raising the ambitions of my students, and we'd do this as a starter activity. I'd just get 5 people up and they'd have to go through this whole list in order from memory, and it works remarkably quickly. If you want to remember it, here's my little clue. That's what's happened when the faster crocs got you. What I use in class is in fact drawing. And you'll see that in a minute. So here's I've had to write it from memory. I just give the students the typed version, so it's just the mnemonic, and then I have to add things as they call them out in order. But you will have noticed, if you were perceptive, that my mnemonic has changed from a faster croc to faster crotch. If I go back there, you'll see that the crotch has been misspelt. Normally has a T in it, but I'm attempting to get humour in here. Many boys in particular really enjoy putting humour into their writing, and it's encouraged in the mark scheme. And girls, I know you're humorous too, put it in. So, a faster crotch. Well, what's that? That was my bottom set year 9 came up with this. These are their sizzling sausages, which count for alliteration. That's F, acting. Facts. F, acts. Cool, eh? This, we had a teacher in my school called Mr. Bowl, and this was his daughter. Hyperbole. Hyperbole. Contrasting pairs. Emotive language. Rhetorical question. Repetition. And so the idea is that these pictures themselves become mental triggers, and I'm getting you to think through different ways for you to learn this so that it just becomes second nature, and that's important. You don't want to be thinking about these techniques, you want them to come immediately to hand. Rule of three. A little story, which you remember was an anecdote. Percentages must be statistics. Opinion, the pie in the onion. Opinion. Right, let's look at the mark scheme. Many teachers will hide the mark scheme from you. Many more will show it to you. But that's too verbose, it's got too many words in it. So I always simplify it by looking at the keywords. Well, here they are. But even so, that's not quite as helpful as just getting rid of all the words you don't need. And so now I know what I've got to do. 65% of my marks are for sophisticated control of linguistic devices. Well, what are linguistic devices? Well, you will not be surprised to hear they are all the techniques in a faster crotch. So if I've got that in my writing, I'm hitting all of these. And by the way, this is the criteria for the A star. And do you remember I told you that those pictures were contributed by my bottom set year 9? And they genuinely were. and you can always aim much higher than the level you're at. You're not going to get immediately up to an A star from a grade C, but you are going to be able to use an incredible number of those techniques and find that your grade rockets as a result. You're going to progress much more quickly because you're ambitious. You may have a teacher, in fact most teachers in schools, will set you just one target to improve on, which is great. You are going to progress, aren't you, and you're going to see yourself getting better. But if you only improve one tiny little step at a time, you've got to be practicing a hell of a lot to make massive progress. And so my shortcut to that is be really ambitious, try lots of things at once, and be prepared to fail. You know, if I try 10 things and fail at half of them, that's not a failure. I've still succeeded at 5, and I probably got close at a couple more. Anyway, enough of the rant. Linguistic devices. Faster croc. Demonstrates style and flair. Now this is particularly annoying to a student because it doesn't mean anything. What does style and flair look like? Well, hopefully if you stick with this video I'll be able to show you. Vocabulary is imaginative and ambitious, and that's really a case of you just going for it. Don't worry if you can't spell the word. If you think it's going to work really well in your sentence, put it in. There is a little word of warning, especially, and I'm sorry to be sexist about this, but this is true, especially if you're a boy, because when you're using humour it's quite easy to get carried away and forget who the audience is for your writing. And so that's my only word of warning today. You really do need to be careful that you're quite appropriate with the humour and the language that you use. But other than that, you can get away with anything. Next, the examining board is really helpful. They actually want a well-crafted opening and a deliberate ending. That's really useful to know. If you're running out of time on the question, you're going to get a lot more marks for the way you finish it rather than just stopping. So it's worth jumping to the end. You know, even if that leap to the end isn't that convincing, you're running out of time, as long as the end itself is convincing, that's going to earn you a lot more marks. And then here we've got another one of those things. Oh yes, I need to paragraph. That's very interesting. Okay, I can do that. Changes of time, topic and talk. Yep, I'll put my paragraphs in. But what does varied for effect mean? And I shall try to show you that in today's video. Okay. Well, that was 65% of your marks. And now we've got the 35% of your marks that are available for your accuracy. However, you might start to notice an interesting pattern here. Ambitious vocabulary plays a large part. And if I just go back to our previous one, you'll see that vocabulary was something mentioned before. Here it is. So your choice of words actually counts twice. That's really useful to know. That's why if the spelling goes wrong, it's not quite so important, because you get credit for the word in 2 parts of the marking criteria. Yes, they want very few spelling errors, but actually if you're only making errors with the words that you're really stretching for, that will still count as very few. And interestingly, this is the A-star criteria. You know, it doesn't have to be perfect. Lots of people can do this. Right, well, what else do I need? A wide range of sentence structures. Well, the easiest way to think about this is sentences that start in different ways, and I'll try and model that for you later. Remember that, it's going to be a really crucial technique. Sentences that start in different ways. And then here, use punctuation consciously. And if you can imagine just having a load of punctuation in your pocket and chucking it at the page, it's almost as ridiculous as that. Obviously, you want to be accurate, but if you're not sure whether you need to use the colon or the semicolon, are you going to lose your A-star? No, because look, you just need very few errors. It doesn't have to be error-free. And the other part of this is, if you're striving to use sentences that use different sorts of punctuation, they will be much more interesting sentences. Your writing will sound much better, and consequently you'll get much higher marks, even if, and remember this, even if you make mistakes. A-star writing is not about perfection. it is about risk-taking. It's about having a go. And you really need to get into that mindset where, yes, it's an exam, but I'm really going to give this a go, even if it doesn't fully come off. Because what happens if you miss the A star? Well, tragedy of tragedies, you still get an A. Right, let's look at an example given to me by the OCR exam board, and they tell me that this is worth a band 2. In other words, it's probably an A grade response. I won't read it yet, but I'm just going to show you my next screen. Do you remember I told you about the start of sentences? Well, look at how these start. My, and, she, her, Stacy. During, alright, that's slightly different. During, when, the. In other words, this candidate here has a really conventional style. Another when down here. Not ambitious, not a risk taker. This is someone who is saying, I don't want the A star, I'm not prepared to take a risk. Okay, so that's a really valuable lesson for you. When you're writing, take that risk, be adventurous. I like to train my students to think of the exam as an opportunity for them to show off and take control. And I mean that absolutely, because if it doesn't come off, you're still going to write something that's possibly as good as this. Or if you're aiming for a B grade, you might lack accuracy, but your sentences will be more interesting than these, and that will push you much closer towards the A. So let's have a look at it. My best friend Stacy couldn't believe it when she got the lead in the school play. The anticipation of all those eyes fixed on her was too much to contemplate. And immediately you can see that this candidate is thinking, right, well, I really want my grade, and so I'm going to focus on my vocabulary. Let's put that in purple. So we've got anticipation, we've got contemplate, and that distinguishes it from a lot of other answers. And the part, it had been made for her. She rushed home to give her family the brilliant news, after she had dutifully informed all of her friends, of course. And here possibly dutifully is reaching for that kind of level of vocabulary, and we'll see it in the next sentence as well. Her parents were ecstatic and set about organising her costume, arranging for relatives to watch her performance, etc. Stacy spent hours every evening locked in her bedroom, practising her lines and preparing herself for the big performance. During rehearsals, the play's director was always full of praise for her, and she really felt as though it was her play. And you can see a candidate's running out of words to show off with, but never mind. When the night of the opening performance arrived, Stacy was brimming with confidence, and here perhaps the candidate's reaching for interesting language, interesting vocabulary, and felt that this was her moment to shine. And here they're reaching for that vocabulary, but it's turning into cliche a bit, isn't it? And so you can see why it's not got into the top band, I hope. It's not quite adventurous enough, neither in the sentence starts nor in the vocabulary. It's not really sustained. Well, let's see what else is going on. Highlighted in green, you'll notice that I've just started to highlight the punctuation. I haven't done it successfully yet. Here we go. We've got brackets, we've got ellipsis, we've got other brackets, and do you remember I said just chuck the punctuation at it as though you had a handful in your pocket? This candidate has really done that, and they've done it very intelligently at the start. So if we look at this first paragraph here, you'll notice that that's absolutely full of techniques, and it says to the examiner, put me in a top band please, I deserve it. And this is a great way to control the expectations of your marker or of the examiner. You've really got to reach out with as many techniques as you can at the beginning. So that's one of the reasons this candidate has done quite well. If I go on to the next bit, that's the end of the piece. You'll see it's actually very short. A very short answer, but it's still going to get a very high grade. Well, let's have a look at what the examiner says in the commentary. The responses to the reading questions are deserving of the top bands, with satisfactory explanation of the effects of the vocabulary descriptions. Now the reason that I've read that bit is that's on the reading paper, section A, but because this candidate, as you can see, has really worked at their own vocabulary, they're able to get high marks writing about the vocabulary in what they've read. In other words, what you do on paper B actually helps you in paper A. These skills go together, and that's a double reason for practicing using adventurous vocabulary. It helps you analyze it in your own writing and also other people's writing in the exam. Now we get to this response. The section B exemplar response is in keeping with the intention that the task is meant to be based on a personal account. So the first thing that the examiner wants to see is that you've stuck to the question. It had to be a personal account. Let's go back and check that. You had to write when things went wrong for a local newspaper article. Now, of course, this personal account does not need to be true. It can be entirely made up. Something to bear in mind when you're reaching for the A star. You might be someone who thinks nothing very interesting has happened to you, and therefore this question would penalise you. Well, it's not going to penalise you because you can make it up. No one's going to check that something's ever happened to you. Just have fun. Remember, you can show off. Right. Rather than a fictional piece. Now here, the fictional piece doesn't mean it's made up. It means that this personal account would actually fit into a newspaper article rather than into a book. So it's not written in the style of a novel, it's written in the style of a story that actually has an ending. Here it is, Stacey's flirtation with the art of acting, and for that we were all grateful. In other words, the story is summarised at the end. It's complete. It's not part of a wider novel. It's not a short story. Right, what else gets it into band 2? Well, look, it's the impressive vocabulary and the narrative control. What does narrative control mean? Well, if you remember the mark scheme, we had to think about deliberate crafting of the ending and the beginning. There is a confident opening and a deliberate ending. And that's exactly what this candidate has done. That's proof that the ending was confident. It's jam-packed full of techniques, and the ending is rounded off here. Even though it's a single sentence, it draws everything together. This is a good higher response. Annoyingly, the examiners don't tell us why she failed or he failed to get into the top band, but I hope I've picked out 2 key things, possibly 3. 1, let's summarise them. The boring way that sentences are started. 2, the lack of consistency in using exciting vocabulary. And 3, it's pretty short. Although interestingly, that's still good enough for an A. I'm going to show you another short piece that I think would get an A star. And this was written in a mock by one of the students in a previous school. So she had to write an application for a summer job. Look at the unconventional way she begins. Smile! Have you ever felt depressed at work? When the monotonous duties become a torture and the bland walls turn into a prison? What you need is someone cheerful, inspiring and creative. Me. I am like a ray of sunshine on a rainy day. No more boring blues for you. I will jazz up your life. I'm not just being boastful. 95% of former colleagues said they absolutely adored and completely craved my special smile. Not only will you be gaining a momentous motivator, I'm an extraordinarily hard worker too. Need coffee? I can pour it. Need essays? I can type them. Need spreadsheets? I can do maths too. You don't often meet someone who can juggle and walk a tightrope at the same time, but then I'm not your average person. It's these skills that make me perfect to work in your circus. Simply put, I can multitask like a girl, because I am a girl. Perfect! So, I hope you found that rather entertaining. And I'll try and show you how a faster crotch or a faster croc has really helped her here. Let's have a look at the language. Well, if I'm crafting sentences for effect, I've got a single word paragraph here. There it is. So I'm getting a mark for that. And look at the way she begins her sentences. Have, when, I, no, and you can see I'm. Things aren't getting repeated. Not, need, this repetition then is for effect, isn't it? I again, another need, I again, but these repetitions again are a beautiful kind of chorus, if you like, a repetition that's deliberate. You, it's, simply, perfect. And you can see that actually this candidate is really crafting their writing. Let me just clear those annotations and we can start looking at the techniques. Now what I teach my students is what I call the random finger technique, and so whenever you look at a piece of writing you can just shut your eyes, stab it anywhere at random, and you will find a technique of some sort. There I am just plopping these things down as though that's a random technique. So here we go. Okay, I just missed it there, but that's a rhetorical question. When the monotonous duties become a torture, well, that's suddenly a metaphor, isn't it? And the bland walls turn into a prison, another metaphor. I am like a ray of sunshine, a simile. 95%, it's a statistic. This is actually the only weakness in the answer. It's obviously a made-up statistic, isn't it? But it still works. I'm not just being boastful, emotive language. I'm an extraordinarily hard worker, emotive language. Need coffee, rhetorical questions. Need essay, repetition for effect, rhetorical question. You get the idea. Anywhere that your finger goes, there's a technique. In other words, this is a candidate who's trained herself to use a faster crotch no matter what. Every single sentence will have a technique in it. Now the way to practice this is actually remarkably simple. What I'll teach my students to do is just respond under time conditions. So if you're practicing it, I do this. I start somewhere on my list and I say to them, right, you've got 1 minute and 1 minute only to come up with a sentence. And so the first one might be that. Okay, your first sentence has to have a rule of 3 in it. You can carry on writing a bit more in the 1 minute, but go. And at the end of the minute I'll hit the next one. You must use emotive language in your next one, and 1 minute, and so on. In the third minute it's repetition. Now of course, if we go back to the response that I showed you earlier, you'll see, hopefully, that she's trained herself to use more than one technique in each sentence. So here she began with that one word sentence. It's also an instruction, an imperative verb, not one of our techniques. Have you ever felt depressed at work? Well, here we've got emotive language with our rhetorical question. When the monotonous duties, here she's really striving for that vocabulary. We've already talked about it being a metaphor, and then another metaphor, and then emotive language, cheerful. And of course torture was emotive language, and prison was emotive language. Inspiring and creative like me. Well, here we've got a contrasting pair, the creative and inspiring compared to monotonous and torture. Here we've got effectively another one-word sentence, but it's linked to this one using the colon. You'll see that she is literally chucking punctuation at the thing as though it was something in her pocket. We've got the colon, the question mark, we've got a really complex sentence here with lots of clauses, helpfully demarcated with the commas, and that sort of thing's going to carry on here. We've got linked sentences using the semicolons. She's really thinking about crafting these sentences. Down here we've got a one-word sentence again with an exclamation mark. She's realised she's got to use brackets, and inside that bracket is the punchline. I can multitask like a girl because I am a girl. Hopefully you get the idea. You just throw everything at your piece of writing and completely show off. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the easiest way to get an A star. Finally, these persuasive techniques, the faster crotch ones, work equally well with argument writing, and so you kill two birds with one stone. Let's quickly go back to the marking criteria and see how this candidate has done. Did she have a wide range of sentences? Yes, she did, you bet. Was the vocabulary ambitious? Yes. Well, obviously there were no spelling errors, but even if she had some, she could still get into the top band. Was punctuation used consciously? Yes, it was. Hopefully you saw that. So that's 35% of the marks already won. Now let's get to the big one. Was she using linguistic devices? Yes, more than one per sentence a lot of the time. She was cramming it with linguistic devices. Very easy to do if you practice. If you practice. Leave this video, go and practice it. Does it demonstrate style and flair? Well, that's the killer, isn't it? What does that look like? Well, hopefully I've shown you. It's something that's absolutely full of devices, and if you just rely on a Forest or Da Forest, you will use devices occasionally. But here's a writer who's layering device upon device, loads within the same sentence, every sentence is crammed with them. That is style and flair. Taking a risk, that's style and flair. Not writing what other candidates will write, style and flair. So hopefully I've demonstrated that for you. The vocabulary is appropriate. Well, her only weakness there was that made up percentage. Is it imaginative? You bet. Is it ambitious? Yes, it is. Does it have a confident opening? Look at that one-word sentence. Smile, completely unexpected, grabs the reader's attention immediately. Not necessarily appropriate to a letter application for a job, but notice how she changed the purpose and audience. She's applying to join a circus. You know, she's realised that actually she might have been taking too much of a risk here, and so she's backtracked a tiny bit, but very skillfully, and I think it works. Is there a deliberate ending? Well, I didn't take you to the ending. Maybe we should have a look. Here we go. Just imagine the scene. Tension rises as I teeter high in the sky. You think I have fallen, but wait. A hand snakes out to grab the rope. It was on purpose all along. And so she's showing what a skillful tightrope walker she would be. You must be glad you've finally found me. I dread to think what life was like without the bounce of my hair and spring in my step. How miserable you must have been, bereft of my unique skills. Did you suffer much? Is that a clock? Time is draining away. You could employ the greatest gymnast around, but be quick before it's too late. Again, very high risk, but it is a conclusion, isn't it? And it does invite the reader to employ her. The clever twist here is it's not her asking for a job that will really benefit her. It's her pointing out what a fantastic candidate she is, and that's why she should be employed. Fans of Suits might notice this technique, and if you're not a fan of Suits, there's still time. Right, well, I hope you've found this video helpful, and let me know in your comments if you like it. Please like it on screen and more people will look at it, and I would love for the standard of writing across the country to improve dramatically, and also good luck in your exams. Thank you very much.